Blumhouse brought back Halloween with a modern trilogy, and now they're attempting to do the same with The Exorcist. They even have the same director on board to steer the ship. I can't say we're not going into this one a little morbidly curious, but let's check out The Exorcist Believer. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
The pod in the cast. 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 The pod in the cast.
Do you know what? I knew you were going to either say, well, yeah, that's not obviously what she said in the movie. It was the blood in the something, but
the body in the blood.
The body in the blood. That was it.
You're supposed to say, "Stop it."
Either that, or there was a line early on in this movie where the daughter runs around yelling something about the innocent piggies and not eating them, and I thought, oh, maybe Tim will use that. But welcome everyone. We are a horror movie podcast, and we are here today to talk about The Exorcist Believer, the new Exorcist movie that came out in October. We worked through the previous Exorcist movies throughout the year. Well, I say that we recorded them all at the end of last year because Tim was going on paternity leave, but they came out over the course of the year. So we've got a full suite now. This is the 5th Exorcist movie, or maybe 6th if you count Dominion in the beginning as two separates. I wouldn't, because it's basically the same movie made twice. So I would say this is the 5th Exorcist movie. So we'll get into it. We'll start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. Before we do start though, I'll just remind you that if you are enjoying the show, please do hit the like button. It helps us out a bunch if you do. And you can support us over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you get a bonus episode every month, as well as some other little tasty nuggets and whatnot. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the show. You look distressed, Tim.
Yeah, it's okay.
All right, well, as long as Tim is ready, we can begin the show.
I was just gonna say, sometimes I refer, sometimes when my sonny has like solid poop, sometimes I call him nuggets, so that's what I was thinking of.
What do you mean solid poop? Isn't solid poop more normal of the two?
Well, I mean, unless like you're sick or something.
Yeah. Alright, good. Well, we started this episode with stories about Tim's son's poop, so we're starting off strong.
You brought it up.
No, I didn't. No, I said the word nuggets in a completely different context. Not my fault, it's your weird word for poop. Anyway, we're starting off strong. But speaking of poop, we're here to talk about The Exorcist Believer. So,
shots fired.
we'll get into it. Of course, this is directed by David Gordon Green, who did the recent Halloween trilogy. We, of course, discussed those movies in depth. Halloween Kills remains our longest review of all time to this day. So, check out those.
We should call Guinness about that.
Guinness are a bunch of made-up nonsense. Yeah. I'm sure there's people out there that have got like a podcast episode that's like 8 hours. I wouldn't think we could compete with that.
Well, the record wouldn't be for like podcasts of all time. It'd be for our podcast.
We don't need Guinness to check that, Tim. I can just tell you it's the longest one we've ever done.
Oh, but I wanted the certificate.
I mean, you basically just pay Guinness to give you a certificate. If you want to pay Guinness to get a certificate, you're more than welcome to go do it.
All right, let me just dip in that Patreon money.
And I think it's the same company that does the beer.
I don't know.
I think it is. I think I learned that at some point. The Guinness World Records and Guinness the drink are the same pairing company. But anyway,
well, maybe I'll just buy some beer instead.
Why not? Sure, go for it. So yes, this is the new rebooted Exorcist movie, which I think is meant to be the first of a trilogy. I think I remember them saying that.
It was supposed to be. Who knows?
Who knows indeed. So we got a trailer, obviously, sometime early in the year. Trailer didn't look too hot, but obviously we're going to give it a try anyway. So we're finally getting to it here. This is our final recording of 2023, but this will be the first episode out in 2024. So Happy New Year, everyone, I suppose. I'll throw that in there. All right. What do I usually do at this bit? The premise of the movie is that two girls who are about 12 or 13 go missing for a few days in the woods, and when they show back up again, they may or may not be possessed by a demonic entity. Because, it's The Exorcist. It's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
So, they should have called it Exorcists because there's two demons. And I know technically that...
Mm-hmm.
I know that the Exorcist isn't the demon. Exorcist...
Right.
Technically, the first movie had multiple exorcists, really.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, arguably only one was technically an exorcist, and the other one was more like his helper. But there's only one proper priest in this one, so it's...
So you're saying the other religions don't matter?
What are you talking about? There wasn't other religious priests here?
Like those other exorcists in the movie?
No, there wasn't. There was like a spiritual woman, but there wasn't an exorcist.
I mean, it's not... Just because they're not Catholic doesn't mean that couldn't technically be called an exorcist. I think if they're helping to expel a demon, I think that fits exorcist.
Okay, I never heard that term thrown around at her, so I never thought of her as an exorcist. I thought she was just trying to help, in the same way that everyone else that was there was trying to help, despite not being, official exorcist or priests, or even, in some cases, even people who went to church.
I mean, that's true. I mean, I don't think they all have their license for sure. But
yes.
I think they are working together to get the job done.
Well, as we saw in The Pope's Exorcist, you can't solve an exorcism until your badge and gun are taken away. And
that's right.
Then you go in with your Holy Bible and cast out the demon. So, yeah.
That was the movie's first fault, is it didn't call Russell Crowe in to get the job done.
Oh, imagine they do a crossover. Imagine that Russell Crowe comes in.
I assume that's where it's leading to, because he had about 200 more cases to go to. I'm sure he's gonna come across this demon at one point.
You would think so. So obviously, The Exorcist is one of the most beloved horror films of all time. So
obviously,
this is a big. Why are you poking at my dialect here? Shut up. All right. I'll just ask Tim, what did you think of Exorcist Believer?
So when this first came out in theaters, if you were anywhere online, you probably heard a lot of people complaining about it, saying how much it sucked, saying it was horrible, blah blah blah, whatever. I think it got pretty low scores and all that stuff. Basically, the internet was doing what it does and was making it sound like the worst thing in the world. So I was going in with, I wasn't already super psyched about it. Just kind of going off the, notion that, do we really need a new Exorcist movie? Especially one directed by David Gordon Green, who, I don't think is untalented necessarily, but, his Halloween movies were pretty up and down. There were some good parts, but
compliment you just gave him. I don't think he's untalented necessarily.
Actually, I mean, I will be complimentary in a little bit, because I think there's some stuff that he's good at, but it's just I mean, there is stuff to like in those Halloween movies, but there's also a lot of stuff to dislike, especially Halloween Kills, which, as you mentioned, our longest episode. Probably because there's a lot to complain about in that movie. But anyway, I was going in with pretty low expectations, and the kind of gist online was that the movie was absolute dog trash and sucked and blah, blah, all that stuff. So going in, I was actually kind of surprised, because I don't think it's not a good movie, but it's definitely not as bad as I feel like a lot of people are making it out to be. It's certainly not the worst movie in the franchise, but I mean, the franchise has some...
The bar's pretty low, to be fair.
But no, I mean, I think I actually liked... there was some stuff that I was surprised that I liked in the movie. I actually thought there are some story bits that I thought were interesting and new, and I feel like a lot of people were kind of ragging on the idea that it was two girls possessed, because I heard the joke a couple of times of people being like, oh, what's scarier than one girl? Two girls, which I understand the joke, that's funny or whatever. But at the same time, though, I do think this does kind of, bring an interesting premise to the series that we haven't really seen before. And it's not just, oh yeah, two is more than one. Like, it's not as simple as that. I think, there's interesting stuff to see how the different families interact with this situation when you have, one family that's, atheist and the other that is, deeply religious. It's interesting to kind of contrast that. So I actually do think that was, a pretty interesting novel idea. I do think, there's some other interesting, creepy stuff in it. I think, David Gordon Green, I think his stuff generally looks pretty good. I thought that, there were some, pretty shots and stuff, and especially early on, maybe like the first 30-ish minutes or so, I was actually kind of digging it. Like, I was like, oh, like I like these characters. I think it's kind of, invested in it so far. Not really a big spoiler, but in the beginning, there's some time where, the girls disappear, and I thought that stuff was kind of interesting and compelling. Like, oh, what happened to them? And, as a parent, like, oh, like, what could be scarier than this, so I like that stuff. Where the movie kind of hits the wall, though, is when it tries to shoehorn all the legacy stuff. Like, if this wasn't an Exorcist franchise movie, if it was just a movie about, like, a possession movie, actually, I'm not saying it would be like amazing, but I think it would be like a pretty like decent to like, maybe like slightly good movie. But shoehorning all this crap and trying to bring characters back and having nods and references to the original, it felt so like dumb and unoriginal, and it didn't feel creepy. It felt like, that the demons know that they're in an Exorcist movie when they're like quoted, like, you're like, I mean, ostensibly, if you want to say like, oh, well, it's the same demon or whatever, but it feels weird that it's just like always this one demon that possesses like people. But then it's like, it feels like the demon knows it's in an Exorcist movie when it's like quoting lines and like doing all this like dumb shit. That's where the movie, I think, just really turns to crap, and that, I don't know, I thought that was a real shame. I mean, there's some stuff after that, though, that I still thought was interesting. I kind of like how dark the ending got. But I mean, we'll get more into that stuff in spoilers. But yeah, it sucks because I think there was actually surprisingly some potential in this, and it just got squandered in doing like the typical usual legacy bullshit stuff that really turned me off.
Exorcist: The Force Awakens, you might say.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like I don't know. I feel like just all these legacy reboots, like people just, I guess as a concept, I'm not completely against it, but I don't know. They just keep learning the wrong lessons from these things, and it seems like all they really understand is like, okay, if we bring any character back from, the old movie, that's good, right? That's what fans want. It's like, no, that's not. It's not always good. Would it be a spoiler to say who comes back in this? I mean, I think it's pretty well known, but I'm talking about like...
Yeah, I mean, I think they advertised that Chris McNeil, the mother from the original movie, is in this, so...
Yeah, so I don't know, it's so dumb to me, because it's not like, it's one, like, I wasn't, super happy that they're bringing Laurie Strode back, in, Gordon Green's Halloween trilogy, but I understand the concept there. I understand how that works for that character. This is just like, I don't know, does anyone care about the mother from The Exorcist? Like, yeah, she's a good actress and it was a good character in that movie, but did anyone want to follow up with her? Like, whatever, 40 some years later, like, I don't know, was anyone like really like jumping up in their seat being like, yeah, Chris is back, woohoo. I don't know.
Yeah. You're actually lowballing it. It's 50 plus years now, but...
Oh, jeez.
50 years exactly, actually, isn't that? Because 73, 23.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, I can't believe I saw it in theaters.
What, the original?
The version you've never seen.
Okay, I was going to believe. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You see the passage of time. When Chris McNeil shows up in this movie... I'm like, oh, dude, she's like 90. Like, time is a cruel mistress. Well, that was a lot to take in, Tim. I got a life story there as a response to that question.
I'm gonna zone out for a bit.
No, I I think you're more positive than I am with the things you're positive about, but I do kind of agree that it's not bad for a while. Like like you say, the first 30, 40 minutes, whatever, it isn't like, it's not trash. It's not great. Like I wasn't like being inspired by it or anything, but it was like, okay, you know what? Is they set up the father-daughter relationship? He cares that she's went missing. They're looking for the kid. This is okay. This is perfectly fine for what it's doing so far. But I too, of course, went in knowing that the reputation for this was pretty low, so I was kind of wondering what the turns were going to be. And I actually noted down a time. I tweeted it out, actually, that at 1 hour and 6 minutes, it takes a very sudden escalation that made me laugh. And it wasn't meant to be funny. It's an unintentionally hilarious moment that completely just kind of exemplifies part of the problem with the movie. I agree with the Legacy sequel complaints. It is so shoehorned in to just try and grab some nostalgia. Like all of these Legacy sequels, it's all just this formula now that they find a way to fit in. But I think the big problems for me with this, because I do think it's a pretty bad movie, it's a combination of a few things. One, it gets borderline silly with some of the demon stuff. In fact, I would say the possession stuff's maybe the worst thing in the whole movie. I think the demonic voice sounds bad. I think it sounds worse than it ever did in the original movie. It just doesn't have the presence. I think they oddly don't focus on them enough, like the kids. Like I feel like we cut away from them for so long as we follow the dad like talking to people about what's going on. I feel like we don't return to them often enough. So by the time we're getting to the big exorcism where they're going to try and save the kids, I was like, I feel like I've barely seen them do anything, exorcist-y by this point.
Maybe that was like, maybe Gordon Green's thinking was like, when you watch the original, it was like, oh, people really like the mom, right? They wanted to see more of the mom. Maybe I'll have the dad be the focus in this one.
And it's just, I think that's a problem. I think we don't spend enough time. I don't think it ramps up really well. The movie's almost 2 hours long, but I think the screen time, particularly in the back half, is really weird to me. It kind of manages this really awkward combination of being kind of silly but also really dull most of the time. I think that's the biggest complaint I have, is that the back half of the movie is just really dull. I mentioned there's a priest character, but he's barely a character. Like, you go back to the original movie, the main character, arguably, of that first movie is the priest. It's his story, it's his arc.
For sure.
All of the movies, and not all of them have been good, admittedly, but they've all had that kind of focus. And I do get the desire almost to say, oh, let's do an Exorcist movie where we don't focus on a priest. I actually kind of respect the idea in that, but I don't think they substitute it with anything else that makes it feel like it's working. So I think the back half of this movie it's kind of a mess, but not even in a funny way. There is a couple of laugh out loud moments, but for the most part, it's just really dull and doesn't earn the things that it's doing. So, yeah, once the Tubular Bells, cover stuff kicks in, and it's like, okay, I get what you want me to be feeling right now, but I'm just not. And sadly, I do have to, I don't want to be mean, but I do think, was it Ellen Burstyn plays Chris?
Yeah. Burstyn?
Yeah. Her performance in this movie was making me think of like really bad movies. But I think part of it's just because she is so old, I don't know, but the way she was like giving monologues, there's a monologue she gives to the main dad at one point in this movie about belief and about battling a demon, and how humans like, oh, I've researched every type of exorcist style ritual in every culture, every religion, and the one thing that's all in common, and she's doing this big monologue, and the entire time it felt like I was almost listening to the mum from The Room talk about breast cancer. Like, I was getting almost that tone of voice as she was just regurgitating this speech out. I didn't feel any like passion in it. I didn't feel any kind of emotion, and I just it took me out of the movie so much. But yeah, the big thing I think more than anything is that it just doesn't actually focus on the girls and what they're going through that much. It focuses more on the parents, which isn't necessarily a bad idea if you're going to show like their struggles with it. But at a certain point, I felt like I was watching a series of montages as they were like quickly discussing options and just, instead of getting to the meat of it, I feel like I was getting the surface level sizzle the whole time. So yeah, not good.
Yeah, it also kind of like one thing you were talking about kind of reminded me like, when she's like delivering her monologue, like it feels like there's a lot of characters that really want to talk to you in this movie, and I don't know, it feels kind of like annoyingly kind of preachy.
It is, yeah.
And the like I guess you could call like the first Exorcist movie, is very rooted in Catholicism and all that stuff, but it never feels like I mean, when I watch it, like I don't really feel like it's trying to make a point and being like, oh hey, like you gotta love God and stuff, and like you gotta convert or whatever. Like this movie, it seems like it's I don't know like necessarily what it's trying to say, but it feels like it's constantly like bringing up like all this stuff about like religion and different kinds of religion and stuff, and I don't know, it just feels like,
I think a big part of it is that the main dad is not a believer, hence the title of the movie. And the arc of the movie, sure, I guess, is that by the end you assume he's going to believe, and that's what's maybe going to help save everything. But there's a lot of characters talking to him when he's being skeptical and preaching to him that this stuff is real, that you have to believe in this stuff. I do think the original Exorcist does have some subtext where it does kind of push very sort of traditional ideas at you, but this movie's way more like overt. This is not subtext, this is text. This is just, you should believe in this because otherwise the devil will consume your soul.
Yeah. And it's also like weird to, it's very different times where, when the first Exorcist came out, like, I think there was, a lot more people that were religious and were watching this movie and, thinking like, oh, this is something real that could happen and stuff. And like, it feels weird to, I don't know, be doing something like that with a movie like this, where it's like, yeah, I mean, obviously there's still like religious people and stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. But, I feel like there's a lot more people that, are just watching it as, just popcorn entertainment and not like as a, oh, this could happen kind of thing or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the other things that's also just like, this is a broad complaint about the movie, is that at no point does it ever have the sense of atmosphere or dread that the original does. The scenes where they're with the girls just feel kind of hokey and kind of schlocky. Where in the original movie you felt this sense of dread, like there's something truly unknown is in the room, something unknown that's scary is here, there's a presence. And when you watch this, you just see that it feels like an Exorcist like knockoff movie as opposed to an actual Exorcist movie.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It feels like every time the girls were doing something, I never felt engrossed that, oh, this is, someone whose body has been taken over or whatever, where, when you watch the first movie, it's like, there's I'm sure lots of credit you can give, to the, to Linda Blair's performance, to the, Friedkin's directing, to the makeup, to, everything was working on such a high level that you do get sucked in and are like, oh wow, this feels dangerous. Like, this feels like this girl's life is in danger or whatever. Like this, it just feels like, people in makeup doing funny voices. Like, it never really felt like super creepy or scary to me.
or even beyond that, not even doing funny voices, just being dubbed with funny voices more accurately. Yeah. It's just a guy who's in a booth somewhere, dropping C-bombs. But and maybe part of it is just because like they don't think, because maybe obviously there was a broad shock value to the original Exorcist, that you had this girl saying these things. And while that broad shock value might not be quite the same today because we live in more desensitized times, I think you can still focus on it from the idea of the parents being shocked that they're saying that kind of thing. And I don't think they ever focus on that in this movie. The parents are obviously concerned that their daughters are obviously sick, there's something wrong with them, but you never really get a sense that they're reacting to the specific things they're saying or the specific violent things they're trying to do or whatever. They just kind of are in a state of shock. There's never any like, oh, she said this specific thing about my dead relative and she dropped a C-bomb. Like okay, it's maybe not shocking in a broad like world sense to hear a teenager drop a C-bomb, but I have to imagine that for this dad, hearing his daughter say that might actually be like, a shock. Like, he's never heard her say that, I presume.
Right.
So, not that he hears it in the movie. It's Chris who hears it, but it's I don't know.
And they also do like that typical like Hollywood thing that always bugs me, where like, okay, yeah, obviously the point of the movie is that he's not a believer, and then you assume that his arc is going to be that he grows to believe. But the thing is, it always annoys me when you have very obvious stuff like that no normal person could do. Like, oh, clearly a demon would be doing this, but he's still like I don't know, like people are like, oh, your daughter's possessed. He's like, shut up. Like you religious people like don't know what you're saying. And it's like, I don't know, man, she looks pretty possessed to me. Like, yeah, if my daughter started looking all weird and demony and using voices and like disappearing and reappearing in places, I'd be like, okay, yeah, maybe there's something to this.
Tomorrow night, Tim's going to be tucking his daughter to bed, and just I don't even know if she said her first word yet, but it might be a C-bomb, Tim, and that might scare you. Yeah, she's too young for her first word. Yeah.
She started saying like dada, but
okay,
I think it depends on how you look at it, because a lot of kids' first word usually ends up being dada, but I think it's just because it's kind of very easy to say. Like, I was something about forming words and stuff. I guess those consonants are just typically pretty easy.
Or at least that's what you tell the wife, so she doesn't feel bad that it was dada and not mama.
Yeah. But I mean, it depends if you think of that as the first word, or if you think like, oh, that's just them starting to form sounds and stuff, and like are they assigning meaning to it, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if she looks at me and she goes, oh yes, dada, like it's just kind of like da 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 da.
One day she walks in or crawls into the room and just goes onomatopoeia and just crawls back out.
I'd be impressed.
That's a very impressive first word. I'd be impressed by that. But I'd be wondering where she got those brains from. Can't be you. You're
smart.
You struggle to say that word now, Tim.
None of you gonna dignify by saying it.
Yes, Exorcist believer. Yeah, not very good. I think, like, I actually think it's pretty fairly rated on the internet. I think the disconnect here is that I think you assume when something gets as much hate as this did that it's going to be a complete and utter dumpster fire, and it's not quite that. But I think that's partly just because we have seen our fair share of dumpster fires. This is a little nudge above that, but it's also in a really murky territory where it's not that interesting either. It's actually a very dull movie, all things considered.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
Oh well. So we do spoilers?
Let's just end the show.
Do you even want to talk about it? Are you done?
Yeah, let's go straight to scores.
Sorry, Tim. We gotta do the main bit.
All right.
So some would argue this is the main part of the show we're getting to. Nah, don't agree with that. All right, spoilers.
I like the opening.
Yeah, the opening. Yeah, okay. Spoilers, everyone, for Exorcist the Believer. No, sorry, The Exorcist Believer. Got to figure out where to put the. So some movie franchises hinge very heavily on where the goes, depending on which entry you're on. So you gotta be careful. Gotta put it in the right place. But yes. So the movie actually opens with some backstory. So it's whilst so the main dad was his name Victor? What did I say? That sounds right.
Jeez, I'm not even sure. I feel like they don't say it that often.
Yeah, Victor Fielding. Yeah. He is in Haiti with his wife. They're American, but they're in Haiti on vacation or whatever. And this is when the earthquake happens. So we see them like hanging about. We see that he's a photographer, but the earthquake happens, and she is heavily injured in a collapsing staircase. To which the doctors say, "Hey, look, it's either your wife or the baby. We can't save both." And it sort of, cuts ahead from there, and we see in present day he's got a daughter who's like 12, 13, and he's a caring dad, but a little protective. Yeah.
A little bit of a flub here, though. They never actually mention who they save.
Tim. 2 points. One, when they skip ahead to present day, it's pretty clear who was saved. Secondly, for a reveal later on, it's actually intentionally withheld.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They want to hit you with a gut punch later, Tim.
That is true.
So storytelling, all that. Yeah, just,
I forgot about storytelling.
maybe we should just end the show if this is the level of discourse we're getting. Oh, dear. But anyway, she does that little trick where she's like, hey, I want to go hang out with my friend after school and do homework. And he's like, no, come hang out with me in my studio, blah, blah, blah. But she said that to him. He eventually gives in. He feels bad. He's been overprotective. He feels bad again because she found a scarf that belonged to her mother, and he took that away from her, which also makes him feel like, oh, I should probably give her an inch here. But she's actually doing that thing where she's telling them that she's going with a friend, and the other friend is saying that she's going with someone else to her parents, and it's because they're actually going to go and do some hijinks after school. They're not going to be
in the woods,
unsupervised. They go to the woods to look for porn magazines, or at least I believe that's what kids do in the woods.
Yeah.
At least back in the days, the internet changed everything, I think. But yeah. But I hear that's how the previous generations found their porn. They just found it in the woods somewhere.
Yeah. I've heard people say that too. That was never my experience. I saw some. I found some underwear in the woods once, but that's about it.
I feel there's more to that story, but we shall move on at this current juncture.
Not really. I just saw some underwear.
See, I feel like you're implying it's like ladies' lingerie, but it was probably like tighty whities or something like that.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Okay. Well, that's less exciting. Anyway, so they go off after class into the woods, and we see them walk for a bit. They've got like a necklace, and they're clearly going to do some sort of I was thinking like a Ouija board or something, but they're going out to do something
I thought
spiritual.
sacrifice to Slender Man.
I wasn't going jumping there, but yeah, Slender Man wouldn't have made this movie better though. That would have just been the match in mediocrity heaven. But they go missing. The dad goes home. Victor goes home. His daughter's not there. He gets concerned, calls the other parents. They're like, no, she said she was elsewhere. And then they all get concerned and go in looking in the woods. So the first chunk of the movie is a story about 2 missing girls. And these parents, a single dad and then this other set of parents who are religious, just because that's relevant later. They all, spend time looking in the woods. The police are helping them look. And that's a good portion of the start of the movie. There's a... Yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah, no, just like I said before, though, I surprisingly found myself pretty invested in, this part. I mean, maybe it's because I'm a parent, but just imagining, that fear of, they're totally missing, what's going on. And, and it's interesting, too, because, other movies, they might... Like, if it was something like a movie where, they got kidnapped or something, you'd probably cut to them in, someone's house or something, or kind of you get an idea of where they're going. But as a viewer, you're totally up in the air as well as to, what's going on. So I thought he did again, to give the movie some compliments, I thought they did a good job of, creating some dread and tension. Like, I like when they're coming back to the school and you're seeing, the empty, chairs and stuff. And, all that stuff, I was like, oh, this is, pretty good. I'm not, I think you kind of mentioned oh, okay, yeah, that's not amazing or whatever, but I'm I'm at least interested and kind of invested at this point.
Yeah, I think the only real problem with it is the meta side of it, which is we know because of this is an Exorcist movie that they have to show up possessed, otherwise it's not Exorcist. So you're kind of waiting for that so we can get the actual story going. It's sadly once that does happen, it's where it kind of starts to crumble a little bit, and so on. There's a scene here where the dad is going to talk to homeless people because there's a homeless camp near the woods, and the homeless dudes are just awful. One of them implies that maybe she had sex in the woods and uses a hot dog to illustrate what he's trying to say, which obviously doesn't make the dad feel very good. He flips a table, literally.
This must be something like some type of interest or something of David Gordon Green's, because he had like that weird homeless guy in the Halloween Ends too. Like
I don't even remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
It was when I think like when like Corey falls over the bridge or whatever, and then he like there's like a homeless guy there, and I think the homeless guy even says like, "I'm Michael Myers" or something, like you're supposed to think he's like crazy, you know.
Okay, I'm remembering this now. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like a weird thing.
Yeah. Obviously, tensions get hot. Like, you know, there's a suggestion at one point that maybe one of the girls was the bad influence, and they kind of almost start to fight each other. But the lady cop sort of steps in and gets them to calm down.
All right. Have you been watching, or have you've been reading too much Danger Street? Referring to Lady Cop.
I have been reading some Danger Street, yes. But what? She's a cop and she's a lady. It's the perfect title.
Sure. I mean, I'm sure she had a name, but yeah, that's fair.
I would be shocked if she mentioned it in this movie. One of the problems of this movie is actually that a lot of the characters are kind of just there for their one thing and never get any kind of depth or anything like that. In fact, a good example of this is that when they're doing the searches for the girls, and the mum of the other girl, what was the other girl's name? Catherine, I want to say?
Catherine.
Yeah. Yeah, the main girl's Angie, or Angela. That's Victor's daughter. But the mother of Catherine's on the news sort of pleading, "Please, baby, if you can hear me out there, please come home." And then in walks this guy with white hair, and it turns out he's a preacher, right? Because we see him later on at the church. And when we saw him at the church later on, and this is after the girls have came back, admittedly, but just to talk about him specifically here, I was getting like almost like Righteous Gemstone vibes from this guy. Like he was doing the preacher things, like, "Oh, the girls have returned home. Catherine's back to us safe and sound. It's a miracle. Praise be!" And he's doing his whole bit. He's getting everyone revved up. That's why they call them reverends. So I'm just joking, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone says, "No, that's actually why they're called reverends. It's because they rev people up."
It's a good point, yeah.
But anyway, and I was thinking, oh, they're setting this guy up to be kind of like, oh, like religion's going to help. Don't get me wrong, this is an Exorcist movie. There's going to be like a real priest who comes in and helps. But I was thinking they were setting this guy up to be kind of this phony, kind of commercial priest who wasn't going to be of any use. But then he just kind of shows up and is there to help later on, but never has a moment where he proves himself or turns out to be an ass. He's just kind of a background character, as if the movie wasn't setting up anything. He's just here. But I thought they were setting him up to be something more, one way or the other, but they never did anything with him. So,
well, I mean, that's something that could have been interesting. Like if he was, one of those kind of like huckster, kind of priests that are just very greedy and after money or whatever, and then like you could have like the possessed girl would know his secrets and shout him out or something like that. Could be something interesting, but they really don't do anything with it. I mean, I think it goes back to your earlier point of where it just strangely doesn't feel really focused on the possessed people.
No, not at all. So one thing that we should mention here is that when the girls are still missing, Victor comes home and his friend has brought in like a spiritual lady and her friends to do like an incantation. And Victor's rightfully upset that people are in his house when he didn't let them in, and tells them to get lost. But they come back up later, which is why I'm mentioning them.
Yeah.
So
I didn't even really understand exactly what religion they were, but I mean, it seems like it has something to do with like speaking in tongues and stuff. But
do you know what this was, Tim? This was every ghost story we watch where there's the Hispanic like grandmother who knows about the supernatural. It was basically that. Just she wasn't Hispanic. She was she was black. I don't know if she had an accent, so I don't know if they were saying she was from anywhere specific, but. That's basically what this character was. It was she knows spiritual stuff and she'll burn some incense and say some things in a different language, and maybe that'll help. That's basically all the character is. It felt like a cliche, I guess, if I'm critiquing it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the girls just get found, right? They turn up in a barn somewhere, right? 3 days after they went missing, they turn up. And they're at the hospital, and they check them physically, they check them for sexual assault, thinking that might have happened. but the girls don't remember anything. They think they've only been gone for a few hours, but they've been gone for 3 days, which that sounds like a really interesting detail to play with. But then they do nothing with it, because then when the girls start acting possessed, it didn't matter what they thought at this moment in the hospital. If anything, it's kind of weird that they're kind of themselves for like I mean, they're in a bit of a trance. Don't get me wrong, but it felt almost kind of weird to even bring that up. Like, just have them be quiet, I guess. But they've got scars, they've got the cuts and things. The main thing they've got is the burned feet, which does lead to my favorite thing in the movie, actually, which is after they do some weird stuff and they're getting concerned, the mum of Catherine's like, you know, after Jesus died for our sins, he went to hell to make a pact or to put the devil in his place. He returned 3 days later, just like our girls. The implication being that they went to hell for 3 days and brought something back with them. And I'm like, oh, let's explore that. Let's do some like further stuff from Insidious. Let's talk about their trip to hell. That sounds fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. Like, it'd be a very different movie, but like that did kind of sound cool. And like, I mean, Christianity is stupid, but I do kind of
I try to be nice to him, even though I'm a diehard atheist, but I concur. On you go.
I mean, obviously, if you know, I know plenty of people that are religious. You know, I don't begrudge them anything or whatever. But I mean, there's a lot.
For the record, I have the same opinion of all religions. It's not specifically singling out Christianity.
Yeah. But no, I the point I was trying to make though is just that I am a sucker for like the like cool like Christian lore, like you know, it's very annoying like, yeah, when people...
I love you go up to a priest and said, can we talk about Christian lore? I want to talk about the lore and the like just using terms that only nerds would use for like stories, as opposed to how a priest or anyone religious would actually refer to the material.
Well, like I don't know if you ever went to like church growing up, because like my family was like, I guess, somewhat religious for a while, and we went to a Methodist church for probably till I was about maybe 13 or 14 or so, and then we kind of were all just like, let's stop doing this. But but like the annoying thing about church is that like whenever you go is like they would always talk about the most boring passages, and then everything would be like a sermon about how like, let's talk about the carrots in the Bible. You know, like no one, you know what I mean? Like no one cares about that dumb stuff. But like if you went to church every week and they're like, yeah, I'm going to talk about when Jesus went to hell for 3 days to declare his dominion over Satan, and then he came back and his feet were burnt. It's like, yes, let's talk about this. This sounds awesome. Like, you know, but yeah, suffice it to say though, that I agree though, that was, in another movie that could have been like a really cool, interesting thing to explore. It is weird that the mother just instantly goes there.
Yeah, she takes a leap. I think that was one of my big things about this part of the movie that I really didn't like. It was kind of the first big warning signs that something wasn't working. Is their first like instances for the audio listeners? Tim's cat just leaped over the mic. Yeah, like there are instances of doing stuff creepy at this part of the movie. You know, once they're back home, they're back from the hospital, and the dad's concerned, but he's trying to give her space and like, you know, make sure she's feeling okay. And we get the generic creepy stuff where the lights are turning on and off, and she's being just vaguely creepy by not saying anything. Eventually, she starts like having all these wounds appearing on her body, which is what makes him take her back into the hospital. But I think this stuff just didn't feel like it. I don't know. It didn't feel like it was progressing in a natural form where she was starting to act out more a character, or whatever. She was just sort of walking around like she was in a trance. Lights would turn off and on, and it just, I don't know, it didn't feel all that compelling to me. There was kind of an interesting idea in the sense that once, I think this is much later actually, but I think once they go looking at the other house, because we kind of like ignore Catherine for a little bit. Oh no, the scene in the church does happen, I suppose. The scene I was getting to was the scene where they go to the house, and it's like the rest of the family have been just like traumatized by being in the house with her, and they're like praying in the kitchen, and the dad's like just sitting in like a ball in the bathroom, and like everyone's just like, I'm like, okay, this is interesting. She's had this much effect on the family, but it's kind of weird that they've all just went into kind of a scared fetal position. And, you know, it's somewhat interesting. The idea that there's a second possessed person in a different house that we can ignore for a while and then go and then see the aftermath of crazy things that have been happening. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like we're focusing enough on the main girl, like, because I suspected that one of them would be the main girl and the other one would be the secondary one, and that's fine, that makes sense. But I don't feel like we focus enough on Angie either. I feel like once Victor is even remotely kind of convinced that there's something supernatural going on, mainly because his nurse / neighbor, played by Ann Dowd, who's like the neighbor who's religious, she almost was a nun. And she believes that this is possession because she brought up something. Angie said something to her about the name she was going to pick for herself when she became a nun, which she never did. And she never told anyone what that name was going to be. And she also never told anyone she had an abortion. But Angie somehow knew these things. So she's like, no, your daughter's got the devil in her. And after he kind of just reads some of the book, which turns out to be a book written by Chris McNeil from the first movie. She wrote a book on exorcisms because of her experience. He wants to find her and talk to her because there's something in the book that really stuck out to him. And that's when
luckily she's pretty easy to find.
Oh, of course, yeah. The cover of Tubular Bells kicks in as we get a montage as he's talking to all of the people who are helping him track her down. So he goes to see Chris McNeil. And honestly, this is the point where the movie kind of, you know, really nosedives for me, more or less. I don't know if he goes to see her before or after the church stuff with Catherine. So do you want to talk about that first, just in case that came first? I'm not sure if it did.
Yeah, we can talk about it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I conceptually get the idea of this is that you have something happen that's in front of a crowd, right? Which kind of happened in the original early on when she came downstairs and, like, pissed herself in front of the party. But that's relatively minor. That's, you know, she wasn't really full on possessed yet at that point.
Well, again, like, you know, if you know, one of the reasons to do a sequel is to try to do, you know, either different things or, like, you know, bigger, crazier things or whatever. So, like, I can see, you know, there's a lot of potential to, have a possessed girl actually inside a church. You know, there's a lot of probably, like, cool, subtle, creepy things that you can do. But, yeah, I mean, most of it is just kind of boring. Her just being very, like, putting my feet up and blah blah, acting restless, which honestly doesn't even seem like a possessed person. It just seems like pretty much any, like, kid at church. I think I actually used to bring, like, little toys into church. I would have, like, little like little action figure fights on the pew.
Well, now it'd be the Switch time. You'd be sitting there playing Zelda whilst the whilst the pastor's doing what he's doing. Yeah, but she disappears for a minute, and then she comes into the room, and she's covered in blood from somewhere, and she's basically just walking down the center aisle saying the body and the blood over and over again. And the you know, the guy, you know, the preacher, who's been very kind of, like, you know, bit of a huckster, like you say, you know, he's got that kind of vibe to him. He's just sort of standing there in shock, trying to finish his sermon, but he kind of gets, you know, cut off track because this girl's just being really creepy. But the way she starts yelling the body and the blood is just kind of funny. It doesn't come off as creepy. It just feels like, you're not really capturing it. I love the idea of a possessed person in a church with a full congregation of people, and the possessed person scaring the shit out of all of them. And that actually sounds like a fun scene. But I don't think they pull this off here at all. I think it just comes off as goofy.
No, it's very bad. And like you say, like, I could see the potential in here for doing some really cool, creepy stuff, or just making it look very atmospheric or something. But it's just, it's just kind of boring. And no one really has, like, much, like, interesting reactions. Like, it's a lot of people just being like, "Oh, what's her problem?"
Yeah,
like,
what's going on? Like,
shut her up.
They're looking at her with their...
I'm trying to listen to the priest here.
They look over at her. She's walking in her dress covered in blood, and I just imagine someone at the front going, "That's a hell of a first period, that." But I don't know what you have her do. Like, maybe you have her challenge the preacher directly when the preacher says something in his sermon. Maybe have her in her own voice, admittedly, like, you know, so it's not stupid, but have her, like, challenge it by saying, "Oh, but that's bullshit. You're an effing idiot, preacher, because this," and, like, have her, like, say something truly disturbing about, you know, something that she thinks is wrong in the Bible or whatever, and have her get more aggressive with it or something over the course of the scene. I don't know, like have her heckle him or something.
I like that idea of being more subtle and just using her regular voice instead of instantly going to gravelly demon voice and just shouting, you know, this phrase over and over again.
The body and the blood. The body and the blood. The body and the blood. Yeah.
She's not even like saying anything. It's like yeah, that is what the Reverend was talking about. He's like, yes, body and the blood. That's what I said. Yeah. It's not like she's like trying to do a criticism or anything. Like everyone else should be like, yeah, she's right, body in the blood.
Yeah, well,
that's the thing we like.
Or why not do, like, one of the things they do later on, and this has been a traditional thing in The Exorcist, is you have them bring up something secret for you know, for the preacher, or maybe just maybe have her shout out secrets about random people in the audience. Hey, Mr. Spielman, you like to dress in women's underwear. Oh, hey, Mrs. blah blah blah. You know, like just start shouting out.
You're still using your ex's Netflix password. Oh, how'd she know?
But you know what I mean? Like, you go down the actually involve the audience so that they start getting really freaked out because she's correct about all this stuff, and maybe even point out something truly bad about some of them. Like maybe there's I don't know, like a pedophile or something in the crowd, and she like says, "Hey, you like children" or something. I don't know, like something that would really disturb them all. But it instead she just sort of really lukewarm, keeps saying the body and the blood, and it's nothing. It's a nothing scene. But it feels like a set piece scene, which is the sad part, is that it feels like it's meant to be one of the big scenes of the movie, and I just think it's kind of lame.
Yeah, I agree. And then, I mean, I think you kind of mentioned it before, how it's like, you know, the first movie feels like at the time it was probably very, you know, subversive, and it was shocking to see this girl doing these things. And I don't know if this movie is trying to be shocking at all, but I mean, if it is, it's really not like succeeding. I don't know, like I don't know, it like try to actually go there and, you know, do something kind of crazy or uncomfortable. I mean, the first Exorcist movie is very uncomfortable. You know, like this little girl is doing a lot of, you know, nasty things that you don't want to see. That's very horrifying. She should be
saying nasty things to the people in this church, at the very least the pastor, since he represents everyone.
Or like, you know, poop in her pants or something.
You know, have her use her own voice, have her say disturbing stuff. Instead, it just feels like we're doing like Possession 101 like schlock, and there's nothing interesting or special about it. It's kind of sad.
You know, like if you told me that, like, oh, like this girl actually wasn't possessed, like one of the girls was possessed and then the other one was just like pretending or something, like I actually wouldn't be surprised. I'd be like, oh yeah, she doesn't seem like really that possessed. And that's something that could be an interesting angle too.
Honestly, an Exorcist movie where the twist is that there was never a possession, and the girl or whoever it is just deeply psychotic or, you know, mentally disturbed, that would actually be an interesting pivot for a movie. Yeah. But they'd have to have balls to do that, so.
Yeah. But then you wouldn't be able to show how cool God is, that he can cast out demons.
Yeah. God, you're cool. That's how people describe God, yeah.
Oh man, I hope the Pope doesn't listen to this episode. He's gonna rake us one.
I'm just imagining a pastor up in front of his church going like, you know what, I think God's pretty cool. He's a pretty rad guy.
Hey, let me tell you about a very cool man, cooler than Twitch or Fortnite.
He's my homie, Big G.
The original Stranger Thing.
Okay, now just imagine a priest with like a cap on sideways and like.
You know, the annoying thing is like everything is so annoyingly IP and pop culture focused, and I'm sure there probably are a lot of priests and stuff that, you know, have sermons where they compare like Star Wars or Game of Thrones or something to to like their lessons or whatever.
They probably do. They're probably like, and just like Luke Skywalker accepted his destiny, Jesus walked through the valley and turned the water into wine, and the children wept. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, so Victor.
Also, you know, would be a good angle would be if one of the family were like Satanists, and like and the daughter was like possessed by Jesus or something.
I feel like that would actually be controversial if they made a movie where Jesus was the enemy and the Satanist was the hero. I think that would actually be really funny because of how much shit would probably be thrown at it from religious groups. I'm an agent of chaos, me. All right, so Victor goes to see Chris, and you know, she lets him in and talks to him about what happened. The one big thing here is that Reagan was mad at her for writing this book and cut her out of her life, and she doesn't know where her daughter is. Reagan's just somewhere else right now. And it's like, okay, I've got a funny feeling I know what the happy ending for Chris is going to be at the end of this movie. But we'll get to that in a bit. So
also, I got a funny feeling who was demanding more money to appear in the movie.
Very possibly. So yeah, Chris comes back with them and wants to help him and talk about the demons and the exorcisms and whatever else. She makes some monologues, the whole thing. And it's at the 1 hour and 6 minute mark where shit hits the fan in a really kind of goofy way. And this is where the bad visual effects start to come into it as well, which is not something that's really there for the first half of the movie. But we get like really bad CGI, like fog and smoke later on, and we get some more goofy over the top stuff. But so part of what made The Exorcist work is the idea that you have this girl doing things that are shocking, but they're also very relatively toned down in terms of like what they are. Right, the bed might float a little bit or whatever, but they're pretty, you know, like what I'm trying to say is when Victor and Chris go over to the other family's house, and the family's all like really shaken up, and they're kind of avoiding her, and the possessed girl Catherine's up in the bedroom. Chris goes up to talk to her, and Catherine references Reagan, right? Brings up Reagan, drops a C-bomb on her, and then stabs Chris in the eye with a crucifix. Both eyes. She does both eyes. And it's really over the top, and I started laughing because of how it was portrayed. Because it wasn't shot in this way where it was this really, like it was all these quick cuts like it was a slasher movie, and I'm like, that's not the vibe you want when you're watching The Exorcist. You want it to feel a bit more like, holy crap, this is real, and she just did that. And I don't know exactly how you do that necessarily. Like, there's probably a few different ways you could do it, but I don't think the way they did it here, between the bad dub voice on the possessed girl, the quick cuts, the CG blood squirting out, and like just like as Chris screamed with like blood coming from her eye sockets, like holding her hands up, I just thought it was funny. I just thought it was kind of goofy, and you know, I didn't feel like, oh, this is something seriously dark. And part of me also thought, if you are a big Exorcist fan and you're excited they brought Chris back, this is what she gets for coming back to the franchise, is her eyes stabbed out. This is the final sort of story of that character.
Well, I mean, this is one of the things I always hate about these legacy sequels is, like, they bring the characters back, but it's always like they have to put them through the worst shit. Like, it's never just like, oh, I'm getting called back to do this thing. It's, you know, like with the Halloween trilogy, it wasn't like, oh, you know, Laurie Strode had a happy ending, but she always knew someday that Michael Myers would be back. It's like, oh no, she's like a miserable drunk that was obsessed with, you know, this one night, and became like this weird like paramilitary, you know, survivalist kind of person. It's like, oh, that's not really what I wanted for the character I like. And like, same thing here. Like, yeah, if you are a fan of, you know, Chris from the first movie, it's not like you're like, yeah, man, I really liked her, but I do hope that, you know, after the movie ends, she becomes estranged from her daughter and becomes obsessed with exorcisms. It's also weird too, because she was an actress in the first, like the character was an actress in the first movie. I don't know if she was like supposed to be like super famous or whatever, but I don't know. It would be kind of weird if it was like, oh yeah, this actress that like appeared in like movies and stuff is now like an exorcist expert and I don't know, is gonna get her eyes gouged out with a cross.
Yeah.
Also, like, I don't know, are we to believe that, like, I don't know, does she do this often? Because I feel like they're trying to almost like imply that, like, oh, not like, yeah, they wouldn't let her be an exorcist in the first movie, so now she's like been training and she's gonna take the demon on, or like, yeah, like there's that kind of vibe to it, which is like, just again, that's like not what you want of these exorcist movies. It's very strange.
Yeah, they can never just let the characters have the happy ending they got at the end of the movie they were supposed to have. But we have to ruin it so that they fit into a sequel. That's a big thing in this movie, actually. She mentions that she never actually saw the exorcism in the original because she wasn't in the room. I did get a slight chuckle out of her saying, "I blame the patriarchy." I'm like, okay, that's mildly funny. She's like, that was mildly a funny little point. But I don't know. So
it's like, I mean, like, I don't want to, like, it's hard because I don't want to complain about, like, sounding like anti-woke or whatever, but it feels like they're weirdly trying to, I don't know, like, solve a problem that didn't exist in the first movie. Like, it's like they were like, yeah, like, the first movie's good, but like everyone that watches it always wonders why the mom didn't get to perform the exorcism, and obviously it was because they were sexist and stuff. It's like, no, like, she's not an exorcist. Like, I don't know, it's very weird. To me. Like, that's a thing.
Even more than that, I think one of the things the original movie set up is that the demon tries to manipulate your feelings, and I feel like she's very vulnerable to being manipulated by the demon because it's her daughter that's been possessed. So
absolutely, yeah.
There was a lot of good reasons why she wasn't in the room.
And like, there was never even a scene though, like, where she tried and they like pushed her out and they're like, no, you can't do this. Like, I don't know, it's a strange thing to, like, bring up.
Yeah. And again, there is subtext in that original movie that does feel kind of old-fashioned, like, the idea that the possession's a metaphor for what happens to a child if there's not a proper father figure around. Like, that does feel like a really old-fashioned kind of not necessarily sexist, but just kind of, like, I don't know,
old-fashioned thinking.
Yeah. So I can definitely see it tying in a little bit, but I don't know. It gave me a chuckle because I just I love the idea of her just accusing these two priests who saved their daughter's life of just being misogynistic.
That's the other thing, yeah. It does. That is pretty funny. Like, it does sound like she's like mad about it, but it's like, well, they saved your daughter. Like, what do you want?
So yeah, she gets her eyes gouged out. And honestly, like, the rest of the movie is kind of a weird blur to me because it just feels like very quickly Ann Dowd's like, well, I was almost a nun, and maybe the reason why I was pregnant, not because I got horny and had sex, but maybe the reason why I got pregnant was God making sure that I wouldn't be a nun, so that I'd be living here and I could help you. It was all fate. It was all destiny. I'm here to help you save your daughter. And
he does work in mysterious ways. So.
The preacher guy's here, the other parents are here, and they believe fully that stuff's going on. I mean, hell, their daughter gouged a woman's eyes out. They're ready to try anything.
She should have gone to jail, right? Like, arrest her.
I mean, she's dead at the end, so no worry about that now. But spoilers, we're getting there.
I know, but
so
people might be watching the movie along with the review at the same time.
It's so wild though how little the one priest that's really. I mean, there's like a scene where the priest is talking to a room full of priests, and he's basically trying to convince them this is a real thing. And it all just builds up to him showing up when they're ready to do the exorcism. They've got these two chairs bolted to the floor in the house, and all these characters are here to help. The religious woman, the spiritualist, she's here as well. So they've called in everyone that they can from over the course of the movie. And the priest shows up and is like, I'm sorry, but the Catholic Church has denied the authorization for this, so I can't take part of it. And they're like, well, we're going to do it either way. So now the almost nun, Ann Dowd, is now in charge of doing the exorcism. So the priest just sits outside in his car praying for them, hoping for the best.
Like, again, like, I don't know. The thing that's, like, weird to me is they make it seem like so easy. Like, all you need is, like, faith. But it's like, I don't know. I'm sure there's, like, more to exorcisms than that. Like, I not to say like she's not qualified. I mean, obviously, she's quite religious and stuff, but I don't know. I'm sure there's like some probably important stuff that you need to know, not just like, yeah, just take the book and kind of wing it. You'll be fine.
It also tells you to hold the Bible tight and don't let it go, as if physically the book itself is like is going to protect you. Just holding it is a help. I don't know if that's true. I thought the information in the book was the important part, not the
right. Yeah,
the literal book as a shield kind of thing. Yeah, what's so annoying about this though is that halfway through everything going on, he decides to go off book and he comes into the house anyway, and it's meant to be this big moment where he's here to help and he's going against the church's rules. And I'm like, I don't give a shit because this guy's not a character. He's barely had any screen time for us to get to know him and understand that he might rebel and do what he's not supposed to help. He's not a character. Most of the characters in this room aren't characters. It's really just the dad and to an extent the parents of the other girl, but they're pretty thin. They're thinner than they should be, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, one of the things that makes the original Exorcist so effective is, you know, I forget the younger, you know, priest's name, but you spend so much time with Marin, you spend so much time with him and he has like, you know, this actual arc, so you're invested when he, you know, is helping perform the exorcism in the end. But like you said, all these, you know, kind of side characters in here, I think I've seen other people refer to them as like the religious Avengers or something like that, which it does kind of feel like kind of what the movie is going for. But yeah, like you don't really care about anyone because you haven't really spent that much time with them. You haven't like seen them have like character arcs or whatever. Like, you know, I guess like some characters, you know, do basically tell their story at you, but yeah, it doesn't feel like, you know, you're actually living it and experiencing it like, you know, the original movie. It just feels like, oh yeah, here's my backstory real quick. All right, cool.
Yeah, the demons don't even, or the demon, if it's one demon possessing both of them, doesn't even really go after most of them in the room, doesn't even mention some of them, so it just feels like they're superfluous. They have nothing to do. It's just kind of fluffy characters that aren't... So there's a couple of really on the nose, like, oh, we have to call back to the original Exorcist moments here, when they're trying to talk to the girls and they're yelling and they're saying stuff and whatnot. At one point, I think it's Catherine turns and says, "Did the power of Christ compel you?" And I'm like, okay, very good. Like,
I don't think my eyes could roll big enough for what is needed for that. Yeah, I mean, that's what I was talking about before, where, it doesn't feel like, you know, something they would naturally say. It feels like, you know, the character itself saw the first Exorcist movie and was like, I'm going to say the line now. You know, people can stand up and cheer if they want, but the crowd won't.
Yeah, I feel like from the moment that they go and get Chris, who's now in a hospital with bandages over her eyes, it's before the Exorcist or the exorcism attempt that she gives her big monologue with these bandages over her eyes to Victor. But I feel like from when he goes to get her till the start of the exorcism, it feels like there's just a series of montages. I don't feel like I was getting full scenes. I don't feel like I was getting full like moments to actually really like get into the characters' heads or anything like that. But
yeah.
The other big thing that happens here is that when the priest does come in, he ends up being useless because the demon just magically twists his head around. Because that's a reference to the original, because obviously Reagan turned her head completely 180 degrees. This happens to the priest without any hands or anything. He just magically, his head just turns around, which is just, I think, obviously they want the callback to the original head twist, right? But here it's like it's a murder. The priest has been killed. One, it looks a bit dodgy because of CG involved. Two, it's like, well, if the demon can just magically kill anyone in the room at any time, then why isn't it just killing the others? I don't understand. You've opened a can of worms with this ability to just magically snap someone's neck with their mind. So, okay. I guess that's the threat.
It's very dumb. And, it just feels like, this guy barely got to do anything except for just run into the room and get his neck snapped.
That was it. That's all I had.
This could be kind of fun if the whole movie had been like dumb and over the top and like she was like constantly killing people like that. Like maybe that could be kind of fun and interesting, but like the way it's placed in this, it just feels like weird that it's like, oh, we're just going here all of a sudden. Okay.
Now I'm thinking about it, this neck snap and the eyes gouging out, they kind of have a little bit in common with what we said about his Halloween movies, particularly, well, all three really, but particularly the first two, where it felt like he was making the shape, Michael Myers, be violent in a way that felt more like a Jason than a Michael. Because, and it's not so much that obviously Michael's a violent character, obviously he is, but it's, you know, you tend to portray it or show it in a certain way that feels a bit more, almost, what's the word I'm looking for here? Majestic. He's a majestic serial killer, right? Whereas Jason's more bloody gouging and like over the top gore. Michael's more about strangling and like swift stabbing and like quietly, you know, tilting his head and that kind of thing. I feel like the same is kind of true here, where this neck snap and the eyes gouging out feel like these over the top sort of gory moments that are big spectacle, like no restraint, just let's just do something violent. And I'm like, but that's not The Exorcist. The Exorcist is the scary idea of the unknown and this force that, yeah, maybe it could do this, but I wouldn't want to see it, because even in Exorcist 3, which we liked, and there's people being killed, typically speaking, it's more about the fact of finding the bodies and the idea of, okay, how's this happening? That's the creepy part. It's not the bloody, you know, scissors in the face stuff. That can be fun, but it's not what makes it good.
Yeah, I always think, I think it was you in the Halloween Kills review. I think you referred to Michael as like parkour Michael.
In that movie, yes.
Yeah, which I always think of. Yeah, it's just the opposite of what you want from him. Yeah, and again, if you go back to the original, what's so terrifying, or like I think one of the reasons why it's so terrifying is it's because this demon is doing all of this to the body it's possessed in. It's like attacking itself. It's not constantly, like doing all these overpowered things to other people. Like it moves some furniture around and stuff, but then, you know, the really scary stuff is like it twists its own head around, or it's stabbing itself with a cross, or, you know, it's, you know, wounds are appearing like on its skin and that kind of stuff. Like, yeah, it's not as scary if it's like jumping out and pulling these magic tricks on people and stuff.
Yeah, it only does stuff to itself, or it's the body it's in, and all it does to other people really is speak to them. It's a manipulation. It's like bringing up stuff from their past. It's making them scared or upset. It's all about getting in and being literally the devil in the ear and talking them down. But here it's like, now they're just stabbing people and snapping necks. I don't know. It feels like it's not spiritually in line with what The Exorcist was. And if there's one thing you want from a sequel, really, like, it's not even plot or characters, it's you want to feel what the first one made you feel. That's ultimately what you want from a sequel of some kind. And I thought this entire exorcism had none of the atmosphere, none of the tension, nothing that original film did.
Yeah. Now, I will say, I mean, this definitely isn't as good as the original or compared to it, but I do kind of like the last little bit of it. So
the choice,
you know, the choice. Like, so basically, like you kind of alluded to earlier, you get a little bit more of the flashback, you know, of Victor and his wife, and like you said, the doctor says, oh, you have to choose, you know, the baby or the wife, and you find out that he actually chose the wife, but then she still died anyway. So I think that's like a really interesting dark thing, you know, to bring up, where it's like, okay, like, how do you live with that, like knowing that you wanted to make that choice and then it didn't work out, and then you know, that's something that you have to live with. And then they bring up like the idea of making a choice again, where you have to choose, you know, one girl to live and one girl to die. And again, it's like, all right, this is a really interesting concept, like how you have, you know, two parents who obviously both want, you know, each of their kids to survive, but if, you know, like, how do you choose, like, who's gonna, you know, live or not, or, you know, can you choose, you know, that, like, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on there, I think. Yeah,
the demon gives them a choice and says one will live and one will die, and it's someone just has to choose which one gets to live. And Victor looks at the mum of Catherine, and they both kind of just agree with each other with their eyes that we can't pick something, because if we pick one, then it's over, and one of them dies, so we have to just not pick. Meanwhile, the dad of Catherine is kind of like scared and like hovering around the corner. So I kind of called that he was going to be the one that jumps out and makes a choice, because it feels like he's the one who's more weak right now.
Yeah.
Not that anyone's going to blame him for it, but he does eventually, after everything's ramping up and things are getting, quote unquote scarier. I wasn't scared, but like in theory it's scarier because there's like CG fog and stuff coming from the fireplace, and it just looks all a bit shit. It's all a bit fake looking. But eventually he jumps out and says, "I choose Catherine. Catherine should live." And it's a demon, so the demon actually does the opposite. The demon kills Catherine because the people who chose get punished for choosing, and now Ange is alive. And that's basically the end of the movie, more or less.
And they actually cut to what I guess is supposed to be like hell or something. So they show Catherine is in, I guess it kind of looks like where they were in the woods or whatever, but it's like this like little area that's kind of like filled with water and stuff. And then you hear like the father says, "I choose you." And then you kind of hear in this, if this is hell or whatever, you hear a demon say, "I choose you." And then she kind of gets dragged down. Like, it didn't look great, but I do like, again, I like the idea behind it. Like, I mean, maybe that would have worked more if we had seen them in hell or wherever they are, previously. But again, I'll give it, some points for the concept.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing where I don't think I'd want to see it in an Exorcist movie, but in a different movie, it does seem like an interesting thing to actually play around with. I think for Exorcist, I want it to be more, suggested, more like in your mind, and like something that you can fill in the blanks for.
You're talking specifically about the Exorcist franchise, not just like generic Exorcism.
Yes,
movies.
specifically the franchise. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. Yeah, like if this hadn't been an Exorcist movie, if it was just a regular demon possession movie, and then we were maybe exploring some of these concepts a little bit more, and we weren't worried about all the legacy bullshit stuff, then I think it actually, again, probably wouldn't have been a great movie, but there could have been a lot more interesting stuff there that you could have done. But yeah, it just feels so beholden to all this stuff that's trying to do that. And then, I mean, we have to talk about this is pretty much the end, but there's the little
there's a little
last 15 seconds or whatever.
There's a little montage of like showing where the characters are now. Angie's back in school, the parents, so the other girl are obviously upset. They've still got 2 kids though. They had other kids, so they have to be strong for them.
Be fine.
Yeah. 3 was too many anyway. Like that, now you just got an even load. But yeah, we do get a scene where
even load.
we do get a scene where Chris is sitting in the hospital with her bandages over her eyes, and the door opens, and who is it? It's Reagan.
Reagan.
Who says it's
not Ronald Reagan? No. That would have been funny though.
No, Reagan from The Exorcist.
Creation.
Is he even alive?
Oh no, that that jerk is dead.
Yeah, I thought he was dead. Yeah. Fair enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I suppose it'd be fitting in a horror movie if the ghost of Ronald Reagan came in, like, Chris,
oh, for sure. Yeah.
Chris, trickle down economics, Chris. Tax incentives for big business, Chris. Anyway, so yeah, Reagan holds her hand and they hug, and it's meant to just be this. And I'm like, all you did earlier is say that she didn't know where her daughter was, and now she shows up at the end. This is such a bare, thin, cheap, like trying to just get a nostalgic, emotional moment out of the audience. It feels very surface level. I can just see through it. I don't know.
How'd she find her? Was she like her emergency contact or something? Like, even though she didn't know where she was, she is like the hospital too. She's
got a notification alert on her phone for any Exorcist related news, and then this one would have mentioned her mother. She's like, "Oh no, my mother was involved in exorcism." Oh,
yeah. It probably was a big headline, famous exorcist enthusiast gets eyes gouged out by little girl.
Amateur exorcist, Chris McNeil, an eyes gouged out incident. I don't know. Anyway,
got to Fox News where they're like, well, that's why women can't perform exorcisms.
Oh no. Oh no. She didn't even try to perform an exorcism. She just walked in the room. She went in to say hello, and the demon didn't take kindly to it.
I don't like greetings.
Cut to the demon, and I took that personally. So yeah, the movie ends in a shot of like looking at Angie in her classroom, but the chair that Catherine used to sit at's empty. And then it cuts to credits, and It's not the original Tubular Bells, but it's much closer because earlier on there's like a moody version of it that plays during the montage. Here it's like more like the classic version, but it's still a new version though because it changes as it goes on. But yeah. The season 1 of the TV show was much better than this. I'll just say that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, 1,000%.
Wasn't amazing by any means, but it was much better than
I thought
this.
it was pretty good. I don't even remember if there was a second season, right? I don't even
There
think
was.
I saw it.
I think I saw the first episode, but I just, I just never got around to the rest of it. I don't think I heard bad things about it, though. I think people who watched it still seem to like it, but...
Yeah.
This was just kind of it's in a really frustrating place where it veers into silly a couple of times, but not enough to enjoy it as a silly movie. It's mostly kind of dull. It has the legacy problems that you brought up. It's just... For all the things going into it, it ends up being not that interesting a movie. And that's really saying something, I think, given, everything that we've talked about.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Weird franchise.
It is weird. It's a weird franchise. You got Exorcist at the top, then you got 3.
Well, let's save. Maybe we'll do some Boko for some rankings. So.
Oh yeah.
Let's save that.
I mean, I just did the first 2, and there's only 5 movies, so I've not left much to the imagination. But we'll do something. Yeah, we'll talk about some rankings. Yeah, maybe that's next week's even more content. Anyway, what are you rating Exorcist? I Want to Believe, the Fox Mulder edition. Oh, actually, speaking of Fox. That reminds me, this was weird that this started with a Universal Studios opening because all the other movies were Warner Brothers. And I know it's because Universal's tied to Blumhouse and Blumhouse got the rights to do the movie, but it's just weird because all the box sets of all the other movies are always been Warner Brothers. So it's just kind of wild that this is Universal, but yeah.
It was wild.
Don't patronize me, Tim, you piece of shit.
No, I mean, I enjoy that stupid shit.
Okay, well, what are you rating the movie?
Yeah, so I mean, as I can definitely see how it's easy to be negative. There's a lot of stuff to complain about this, but maybe it's because my expectations were so low. I was a little surprised. Not to say that I necessarily enjoyed it, but that it just wasn't, the massive pile of shit that I saw a lot of people, claiming it to be. The problem is the stuff that is bad does, really make me mad. Like just in general, like legacy sequel bullshit stuff is particularly annoying. Versus where if it was just like a bad movie that made some dumb choices on its own, I feel maybe it'd be a little more forgiving. But I think I'm gonna give it. I mean, it's not a great score, but maybe a little surprising the way some people have talked about. But I think I'm going to give it a 4.5. Yeah, because there was some stuff and some that I liked in the beginning. I thought unfortunately, the girls' performances weren't great, but I thought everyone else, did a pretty good job. And there were like some shots and stuff I liked, mostly in the beginning, versus kind of the second half of the movie once it does start getting to some of the more like schlocky bits and stuff with like bad CGI or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I guess there's enough like ideas and stuff early on that I kind of dug. That I'm not going like a super surprisingly low score, but I mean, it's still not a great score, really.
No, I think I'm just a flat 4. I can maybe go lower, but I think I'll just go with a flat 4. Yeah. It's just an uninteresting, dull movie. The occasional little moment or idea that seems like it has potential, either as part of an Exorcist movie or maybe as part of just a standalone movie that's separate. But for the most part, though, by the time I got to the back like 30 minutes, I was so out of touch with the movie at that point. I was just I'm waiting for you to end. I don't care about anything that's happening now. I'm out.
Yeah.
And it's sad when you feel that way when you're in the back chunk of a movie. So, as far as 2023 catch up season, which we're now officially started.
That's true, yeah.
We have started with one of the stinkers. Let's hope they're not all stinkers, because I'm worried. I'm worried they're all stinkers, Tim. So
yeah, I mean, there's a few that I'm interested in checking out, but I'm not particularly hopeful. Yeah, I mean, this was bad, but admittedly, it was one of the more notable releases of the year.
Notable does not mean good, but yes, that's
true.
That is accurate.
I think you mentioned it before too. Like, this originally was proposed as a trilogy, and I think specifically a trilogy, from David Gordon Green. And I am very curious to see if they are going to go through with it, because I do feel like, yeah, I mean, this. I don't know, if it did well at the box office, but
I was just checking that very thing right now, Tim, because I feel
like the reception wasn't great, so I don't know if and I believe they paid quite a bit for the license too, for the franchise. So I think it was they were kind of hedging their bets that this was going to be a big moneymaker. So if it doesn't do well, I don't know what that's going to say.
It made 136 million worldwide.
Okay.
Which isn't amazing, but for a horror movie, I'm not sure if that's too bad.
So I would assume that it didn't take a ton for the actual movie to make, but I think the rights cost a shitload. So
to put that in perspective,
I don't know what that says.
It's about half of Halloween 2018. It's about half of what that made.
Oh, yeah, that's not great.
So maybe that gives us. Well, what about Ends? What did Ends? Did Ends make significantly less? Ends, yeah, it's more than Halloween Ends. Halloween Ends only made about 104 million worldwide.
Okay.
So, yeah. Kills is a weird example because it was, middle of, it went straight to Peacock, middle of the pandemic.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
So,
yeah.
That one's a bit of a weird case. Oh, that actually still made more than Ends. That made 133 million. So,
oh, wow.
So, yeah, that's the one that's the closest to this. But that was middle pandemic when it was out in Peacock at the same time. So,
yeah, this
didn't have that. So the fact that the Halloween Kills did that well when you could get it at home for relatively cheap means that's impressive, I guess. I hate that movie, but it's impressive.
Yeah.
So, there you go. That's Exorcist Believer. Next week is an off week for the public. It's a week off of the month, but patrons will be getting an episode next week, so look out for that. You can, of course, get the bonus episode over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and you get an extra episode once a month. And next week is this month's. So, plus we're also doing a thing with Even More Screams, which is our sort of series where we just do, shorter topics, things like that. Sometimes they're, we did like a big one previewing the horror of 2024, but we just did one talking about Scream 7's things, and it sounds like next week we might be doing a ranking of the Exorcist movies as a little bit of bonus content for Patreon. So if that all sounds like fun, there's also bonuses for other shows over there. Please do go and check it all out, and it'll help support the show, keep it coming, and you get some extra stuff. So yeah. Anything to add, Timothy, before we go?
I love you. I don't know.
You're speaking to me or the audience?
Both. Okay. I consider you part of the audience.
What? How does that work?
You're listening to what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining the show. We always appreciate it. Keep watching.
Oh wait, no, I did think of something. Have you seen the have you seen the Look Who's Talking movies?
I think I've seen parts of it. I mean, I know what the concept is.
So it's like, you have Look Who's Talking, where it's like there's like a baby talking, and then they have Look Who's Talking 2, which is two babies talking, and then do you know what the third movie is?
Is it pets talking?
Yeah, I think it's called Look Who's Talking Now, and then it's like the pets talking. But I was just thinking that could be a good trajectory for these Exorcist movies. You have one girl that's possessed, then you have two girls, and the next one you could have like some possessed dogs or something.
All right. Thank you very much for joining, everyone. As it Screams After Midnight, we'll see you next time. Keep watching scary movies the body, and the blood.
The blood.